Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Abled and Disabled the podcast where we have honest conversations about living with disabilities, shedding light on experiences, and breaking down the barriers around understanding.
Today we got an important topic to dive into. Multiple sclerosis, or MS. Now, neither of us have MS, but we think it's super important to talk about, especially because it's one of those disabilities that's not always visible, but it impacts a lot of lives, so I'm excited to get into it.
Exactly. MS is something a lot of people have heard of, but not everyone truly understands. It's a chronic illness that affects the central nervous system, causing a range of physical and cognitive symptoms. And, as you said, Heather, it's not something you can always see on the outside. But MS can make daily life a lot harder. So we really wanted to give it some much needed attention today.
Right. MS is often called an invisible illness because its symptoms aren't always visible to others. And people living with MS can sometimes feel misunderstood or isolated because of that. The symptoms themselves can vary widely, but they often include things like fatigue, numbness or tingling in the limbs, difficulty with balance or walking, and vision problems. Some people experience cognitive changes too, like difficulty with memory or concentration.
Yeah, and it's important to note that the severity of symptoms can fluctuate. Some people with MS go through periods where they feel almost normal, and then have flare-ups where symptoms become much worse. That unpredictability is one of the hardest parts for people living with MS. It can really affect their day-to-day life and even their ability to plan for the future.
Exactly. And MS can affect anyone, though it's more commonly diagnosed in women and usually in people between the ages of 20 and 40. It's also one of the leading causes of disability in young adults, which makes it something that's really worth talking about more.
And while we don't have MS ourselves, there's something to be said about how important it is to raise awareness for conditions like MS, especially because it's such an unpredictable illness. By talking about it, we can help people better understand the challenges that someone living with MS might face and how they can offer support.
Definitely. There's also a lot of misconceptions around MS. A lot of people think it's just a disease that affects older adults or that it's easily detected. The reality is that MS can often be misdiagnosed because its symptoms overlap with so many other conditions, and the diagnosis process can take years. Some of the early symptoms can be subtle, and people might write them off as just stress or aging.
Yeah, that's a good point. And because MS is so individualized, no two people experience it the same way. That's why it's so important to really listen and understand when someone with MS is sharing their experience. What works for one person might not work for another. It's not just about the physical symptoms either, but the emotional and mental toll it can take. Living with a chronic illness like MS can lead to feelings of isolation, anxiety, or depression.
Absolutely. And for those who don't know much about it, MS is an autoimmune disease that attacks the protective covering of nerve fibers known as myelin. When the myelin gets damaged, it disrupts communication between the brain and the rest of the body, which leads to all of those symptoms you mentioned earlier. It's still not fully understood what triggers the immune system to attack in this way, but it's thought to involve a combination of genetic and environmental factors.
Right, and while there's no cure for MS, there are treatments that can help manage the symptoms and slow the progression of the disease. Disease-modifying therapies, or DMTs, are one of the primary ways to manage MS, but there's a lot of trial and error in finding the right treatment. The emotional support from friends, family, and support groups is also crucial in managing the mental and emotional aspects of the disease.
That's such an important piece of the puzzle. I think we often focus so much on the physical symptoms of conditions like MS. But mental health plays such a big role in the overall well-being of someone with a chronic illness. Having a good support system, whether that's family, friends, or a community that understands, can make all the difference in coping with MS day to day.
For sure. And it's also about recognizing that every person with MS has a unique experience. Some might have relatively mild symptoms, while others may have more severe, debilitating issues. But just because you can't see someone's illness doesn't mean it isn't there or that it isn't affecting them. It's all about being compassionate and understanding.
Exactly, Zeb. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we can educate people about the realities of living with MS. For those who are newly diagnosed, or for people who might not understand MS, it's so important to be patient, ask questions, and be supportive.
Absolutely. And for anyone who's living with this right now, just know that you're not alone. There are people who understand, and there are communities online and in person that are out there offering support. It's important to reach out and not keep everything bottled up.
Yeah, I think that's the key message we want to get across today. MS is complicated, it's unpredictable, and it's a lifetime-long condition, but that doesn't mean people can't live fulfilling lives with the right support, treatment, and mindset.
Well said. That's all we have for today's episode. If you've learned something new, or if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this conversation, please share the podcast with them. We'll love hearing your feedback, so feel free to drop us a comment, rate, and review.
Thank you for tuning in, and as always, remember being able or disabled doesn't define us. It's about how we adapt, support one another, and keep pushing forward. Take care, everyone, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Stay pink and yellow. Bye!